You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
I'm Katrina, and I love anime.
I'm Steven, and I'm aware of anime.
But what if that affection could rub off?
Perhaps that excitement in her eyes got me curious.
I could offer up some solid anime.
I could give them a watch, just to see what all the fuss is about.
And maybe, just maybe,
I could learn to love anime too.
Welcome to Inspired by a Weeaboo. Welcome back to Inspired by a Weeaboo. I am your host, Katrina, and with me is my husband, Steven.
Hello.
We just finished episode 9 of Fullmetal Alchemist. Steven, what did you think?
I felt like they started a different path with this episode because after everything that we kind of saw with the other episodes where it was very dark, it kind of showed kind of a light side, you know, seeing Ed and Al doing some good. Yeah. And not to say that they haven't done good before, but I don't know, it just felt like a more positive episode, trying really to wash a lot of the dark stuff out of your mouth. Yeah. As we said. So Ed got his first assignment, and it was to go out to this mining town and investigate. He didn't really specify. I don't remember specifying what to investigate. He just said go investigate the mining town.
Well, to inspect the mines.
Or to inspect the mines. And when he gets there, the people are, seem pretty friendly. They're all excited. And they call them, what was the term the boy used? We got, oh crap. Essentially saying they got money. Let's take them for all they're worth.
Yeah.
I can't remember the term he used specifically, but it was to imply, hey, we got people with money. We got to get what we can out of them. Yeah. Room and board, food, and all that jazz. And then of course they get in there to get a room, and they're just like $200,000, and we're like, what? So they freak out, and he's like, yeah, well, this is highway robbery. But then when they find out that he is an alchemist, a state alchemist.
Yes.
It wasn't an alchemist at first. State alchemist is where things changed because he was trying to barter with them by fixing things. And then when they found out he worked for the state, they were like, oh, you're a military dog. Get the hell out, and kicked him out. And I was assuming at first that Al was going to be the voice of reason, maybe try to talk them into maybe understanding the situation, and maybe they'd kind of come around. But then the lieutenant who was over this mine, very Frank Burnsy in a way, came in, and he's just like, oh, look at my people, and just like how he runs things like he's the king god of the mining town. Yeah. And then when Ed intervenes, I don't know why I'm getting their names mixed up in my head, but when Ed intervenes, then they're like, oh, he's a state alchemist, and he flips his tune, which kind of caught me off guard because he's not a high rank, right?
Who, Edward?
Ed is not a high ranking, but yet
he's not a high rank in the sense of, okay, so with the guy who is over the mining town, he is, I think they called him a lieutenant.
Yes.
And he's basic military. So think of the state alchemist as kind of the, I guess, the muscle would be the way to kind of put it. Like the lieutenant is just a regular average person who they just kind of put into place, to do whatever in the town. But Ed holds a position where, it kind of demands respect. They're like a special corps, I guess you could say, within the military.
And yeah, because the moment he laid eyes on him and said, oh, no, he's a state alchemist, like he flipped his tune, and he was just like, oh, treating him like he's royalty, and takes him back to his fancy mansion, and understanding that he was there to investigate the mines or inspect the mines. He bribes him, and he's like,
Yes.
and I'm assuming the bribe is just to say everything is fine and dandy, you inspected it, yada yada,
Yeah,
and
basically.
then go about your merry way. And it's clear that what's his name?
Mustang?
I don't know why I kept thinking I don't know. Mustang knew what was going to happen, or at least felt that Ed's heart and his head would go down the right path, like he would figure out this ratty bastard. Now, granted, whether or not he would know how Ed would handle it, I couldn't say that was something he knew 100%, but knowing that he would fix the problem, and clearly the lieutenant was the problem.
Yeah.
That's what he was kind of hoping for in the long run. And so I'm assuming once he got that bribe and he went back to the town and he was trying to explain to them the situation, because the mine collapsed and Al was there to help, luckily, to save the kid. So
no,
we didn't
the
have
end collapsed, not the mine.
Or the end collapsed, excuse me. And he saved the kid, so we didn't get to see another child die. Thank God. And so when he came back and they were still angry and he was trying to explain, they were just like, turn everything into gold. And there's that. We have discussed that before, where wasn't the one asshole at the very first episode, wasn't he doing shit like that? Turning things into gold?
No, he never turned anything into gold. They've mentioned that you can turn, metals into gold and everything, but that in itself is also, kind of a taboo.
And I'm assuming that is a taboo just because it's not in the same realm as human transmutation. But pretty much using alchemy for the sake of wealth.
It's not just that, it's that it's not actual gold. Think of it as you're making an imitation.
Okay.
Like everything with alchemy, it's real, but it's not like if it was made, if that makes sense.
Okay, well, that's where I'm trying to understand their rules of alchemy, because to turn lead into gold, you're still using material, you're still using an element, you are transmuting it into another element, which, from where I'm standing, seems like that would be an easy equal transfer. Like it should be done. But the way this makes it sound, well, let's go back to the grass and bread explanation like he used in the very first episode. So would it be bread that's just kind of grass, but it's bread?
I think it would also depend on what he mixes with it. Because as you see in like the military exam, the one guy used trees and water to make a hydrogen balloon. So if you think about it, like the trees would be, kind of, paper, like paper mache. And then the water would be where, the elements between the trees and the water is how he was able to make a hydrogen balloon. So I think it kind of boils down to, like they say, it's a formula. Like you can't just take one thing and make something else with it. It's a formula. Something has to be made, but it has to be able to have those particular materials to make them up.
So you could essentially make gold.
I mean, yeah, he made gold. He put those gold coins on top of all of that coal and then made all of that gold that was in the room. However, it didn't last. It ended up turning back into coal.
Well, I guess what I was talking about is like if you had the right materials, if you had the right elements, you could essentially make gold.
I'm sure, yes.
So then it's not outside the realm of possibility. Now, based on the way he did it, obviously, yeah, it was like a half-assed attempt at doing
Yeah.
that just for the sake of playing trickery. So he presents him with this room full of gold. And I will give him credit for the way he words everything
Yeah.
very specifically, because the guy's like, well, this can't be on the books. And he's like, well, it doesn't have to be. It's like, this all can be yours, and you can just sign it over to me for free, and then this is yours. And, it's just whatever. It's never on the books. It's just, you did that. And he's like, oh, that sounds great. And so he swindles this guy out of the mine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, very clearly. And this guy is such a greedy prick that he didn't see he was being swindled.
Yeah.
Because just the fact of how everything was worded,
Mm-hmm.
anybody with half a brain could have figured out you're being fucked over, dude. But he was just too greedy, and he was just like, this sounds like a great deal. I got all this money, all this gold, and I can be free of the mine and no worries. And of course, it all turns back to coal, and then he's stuck with nothing. And I'm happy that the miners were actually, like, they understood what he was doing, and just, you saw the good that Ed was trying to do.
Yes.
He was trying to give them their town, keep their home, and do right by these people. And it was uplifting. I liked that. That's how it kind of played out, and they got their revenge on that asshole lieutenant.
Yeah.
And we get to see Mustang. There we go. There's that name again. He's getting a promotion. He's now a colonel.
Yes.
He's no longer a lieutenant colonel. He's a colonel. And he's moving on somewhere, it seems.
Yes, he'll be going to a different city.
So, based on the way this ended, are we now kind of back to where we were, or are we going to kind of bounce between other timelines? Because when we got back to Ed and Al at the very end, we are now back to their ages they were when we saw them at the beginning, at 15 and 14.
Yeah, we're back to...
So are there going to be any other moments where we see them?
You're going to see more flashbacks. There will be...
I wouldn't call them flashbacks per se. I mean, just points in their story where we go back to those moments.
Yeah, you'll see... again, there's a whole story with the teacher and the boys when they were younger. You'll see more of what happened right after Al disappeared and what Ed did to get Al back, even though it's definitely more of a impactful scene when you see it.
Mm-hmm.
I think you even see what happens to... I don't remember actually if they show it in this one or if it's in Brotherhood, but in one of them you actually get explained what happened to Winry's dog and why he has an automail leg.
Okay. But I do like how they are... where you have said that everything is connected, everything is intertwined, so it feels like that they are telling the bits of the story that need to be told at certain points at time. So if we have to go back a few years and then we come back to the present, which we're going to call the present 15 and 14, because that's the oldest age we've seen them at thus far.
That is the present.
So when we go back to that, we're back on that path. But when we go back to an earlier date, when they're slightly younger, then I'm assuming those are threads to the story that are going to tie back around to something present day. Yes. And how all that interweaves together. So that's a clever narrative trope that I'm liking how they've structured it. Yeah. And I don't know if... Have you watched Brotherhood at all? Yes. Okay.
I've seen Brotherhood from beginning to end.
So do they do that same thing? Do they weave the narrative in that regard?
I mean, I still feel like it's basically still the same narrative. You're still watching the same show. It's just some of the characters have changed as far as when it comes to... I don't even want to say it, but some of the characters have changed, but none of the, not Ed or Al or Hughes or Mustang or any of them. But it's other characters that are detrimental to the story. But I don't remember it being other than finding out a hell of a lot more about their father, I don't remember there being massive differences, other than, of course, the story also kind of being sped forward to get to those points. I don't know. Like I said, I've only seen Brotherhood once. Like, this one I've seen a whole bunch of times, but Brotherhood I've only seen once. So I feel like rewatching it, we're gonna notice those differences, obviously.
Well, see, and that's actually a point I wanted to kind of touch on, is if we do get around to Brotherhood,
Mm-hmm.
I honestly feel like that we may want to discuss the episodes up to a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
And so anything that we're kind of practically repeating here, like we cover those all in kind of one go.
Yeah.
You know, kind of in a bunch if need be, because if we're just going to be talking about the same stories, just different ways of telling it, then, I mean, recapping all the stuff that we're already talking about would kind of seem redundant. But then once we start getting into episodes where they deviate,
Mm-hmm.
then that's where we can really start to tear them apart and really deconstruct them from there. Because, like I said, I like the way this is going, and based on what I've heard you say,
Mm-hmm.
it feels like it does it a disservice. And I don't know. I guess I'd have to see it for myself to really understand if I would still feel the same way.
It feels like which does it a disservice.
To speed through everything in such a way, you know, to just be like, well, we gotta go. And if that is the way the manga works, I understand that. I've actually seen that in other regards. We'll go back. I'll use The Walking Dead as a great example. Since I brought that up last time, in the comics, Shane died like in the 6th issue of the comic. So he was like dead and gone real quick.
Yeah.
And then in the show, we see that he is, you know, extended through, I think it was just 2 seasons. So we got to see a lot more of him, and there was more character growth. And for the show's sake, I can understand why that's possibly necessary. I mean, if he seemed like an interesting character or a compelling enough character that you kind of stretch him out and evolve him through more narratives, do that.
Yeah.
But with this, if they're sticking to the manga and a lot of the story beats just kind of flow and that's what they're imitating, then sometimes it doesn't necessarily work for a different medium.
Yeah.
In my opinion, because again, with Shane, it just, the way the comics flow, and I know they've changed so much in The Walking Dead through that, and that's one of the reasons I hate to say that I stopped watching because of that, but I did. I knew the story. I knew it from beginning to end. I've read it from beginning to end, and I saw the narrative I wanted to see.
Yeah.
And they deviated so much from it that I was just like, I'm not compelled enough to keep up with what you're doing. I saw what I needed to see, and that's it. And if they had repeated that identically, I might have still felt the same way. Mm-hmm. Because I'm like, well, I know how this goes. But with this, they didn't have the full story. They're allowing a little bit more growth in their storytelling. They're allowing themselves to add a little bit here and flourishes there to try and pad it a little bit. But I don't feel like it's doing anything. Again, not having any understanding of the manga or having read it, I don't know what they're padding, but none of it feels like unnecessary exposition or unnecessary stories. They all feel like they have a purpose thus far, and I appreciate it. I like what they're doing with it.
Yeah. None of them feel like what we call filler episodes.
Yeah. It doesn't feel like fluff.
Yeah.
And so, and again, this is only 9 episodes in, but I mean, just from what I've seen, they all felt like they've served a purpose to the narrative in some way. There's not been just an episode that's like, well, we had an adventure. Like even this, we hadn't really seen this side of Ed before. Seeing what he has done and what that did, apparently going forward, that now he has made a name for himself where people are like, oh yeah, he's the alchemist of the people. He's, you know, our hero. Yeah. And so you know that he's done more. He's had other exploits where he's helped people. He's tried to do right by people.
Yes.
And the people love him for it. And this easily could have been a filler episode, but it wasn't because of that detail.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. And I don't know, just knowing that I know people love it, but I'll have to see it for myself to judge, because I'm liking this as it is presented so far.
Yeah. It took me so long to finally watch Brotherhood because I was so angry because I loved, this first one so much. And even knowing that, it followed the manga and everything else, it was because of the different characters and how the characters were changed, which is what made me angry. But knowing that it was from the manga and everything didn't really help at first until my buddy Jeff suggested I look at it as an alternate universe to this one.
Yeah.
Kind of a what if scenario. Like a lot of the main story plays out, but you get a hell of a lot more backstory, and especially about a lot of other characters that you don't really get in this one as much. But just those characters being changed worked for it. And obviously, of course, it would work for it because it was based off the manga. But I feel like even in this one, it still worked for it. It's just different.
Yeah.
And I love it for what it is, and I will always love it for what it is.
Well, I'm all about it. I like what I've seen thus far, and
It makes me happy.
even based on I know we've only really done 3 so far, but even back in Death Parade, I liked what it was, but this to me is a lot more compelling.
Yeah.
I really enjoy the characters that we're seeing. I'm enjoying the concepts that they're bringing to the table, and I think it has a lot of promise. So I'm looking forward to the rest of it.
It makes me so happy. Well, I feel like we discussed the most that we could about this episode, and we will be back next week with another episode. So, Steven, why don't you take us out?
Well, as always, tell your fellow weebs to find us on their favorite podcasting platform inspired by Weeaboo. If you want to listen to episodes early, go to patreon.com/pencilpaperproductions. You can also listen on YouTube at Pencil Paper Productions, or youtube.com/pencilpaperproductions. You should know that by now. See all the video art or whatever. It doesn't change, but if I could, but I don't. I'm lazy. But it looks good. And you can also go to pencilpaperproductions.com/inspiredweeaboo to keep up with any and all things.
Well, all right, my weebs. Until next time.
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.